Success comes in many forms, but my family only recognized one. The corporate ladder climbed exactly the way they thought it should be. I'm Alexander Mitchell, and this is the story of how I went from being the family disappointment to the one signing their paychecks. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Chicago, everything in my life was measured against my siblings' achievements. My older brother Michael was the golden child, Harvard Business School graduate, and rising star at Goldman Sachs. My sister Diana was the perfect corporate attorney, making partner at her firm by 30. And then there was me, the youngest, who dared to think differently. Another startup, Alex? Mom would sigh whenever I mentioned my latest venture. When are you going to get a real job like your siblings? She'd worked at Meridian Technologies for 20 years, climbing from junior analyst to senior vice president of operations. The corporate world was her religion, and my refusal to join, it was nothing short of heresy. Dad wasn't much better. As a retired investment banker, he measured success in quarterly reports and profit margins. My early attempts at entrepreneurship were met with thinly veiled disappointment. You know, he'd say during our weekly family dinners, Michael's firm is always looking for analysts. With your degree from Northwestern, you'd be a shoo-in. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd been building something bigger than they could imagine. While they saw me bouncing between startups, I was actually executing a carefully crafted plan. It started 5 years ago when I noticed a gap in the tech security market. Companies were spending millions on cybersecurity, but their physical security systems were stuck in the past. I founded Mitchell Security Solutions with $50,000 borrowed from my savings and a vision of integrating AI with physical security infrastructure. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked from my garage, living on ramen and coffee, pouring every penny back into development. My family's comments grew increasingly pointed. Still playing with your little security company. Michael would smirk during holiday gatherings. Let me know if you need a real job. I can put in a word at Goldman. Diana was more direct. You're embarrassing the family, Alex. Do you know how it looks when people ask what my brother does? And I have to say you work from your garage. But I had a secret weapon they knew nothing about. Dr. James Anderson, my old professor from Northwestern and one of the leading experts in AI development. He saw the potential in my ideas and became my mentor, opening doors they didn't even know existed. Keep quiet about it, he advised when we secured our first major contract. Let them underestimate you. It'll make the revelation so much sweeter. That first contract led to others. Major banks, tech companies, and eventually government facilities began adopting our security systems. I moved operations to a real office but kept the company private, operating through shell corporations to maintain anonymity. The press called me reclusive. I called it strategic. 3 years in, something unexpected happened. Meridian Technologies, my mother's company, announced they were looking to acquire a security firm to modernize their infrastructure. Mom couldn't stop talking about it at family dinners. It's going to be the biggest acquisition in company history, she'd boast. They're looking at all the top firms. Of course, they'd never consider one of those small startups. I smiled and passed the potatoes. What she didn't know was that Mitchell Security Solutions had already caught Meridian's attention. Our AI-driven security systems were years ahead of the competition, and our client list was impressive, even if no one knew who owned the company. The acquisition talks were handled through intermediaries. I let my team handle the meetings while I worked behind the scenes. Mom would come home excited about the mysterious company that might save Meridian's security division, never realizing she was talking about her disappointment of a son. Then came the twist that would change everything. During the negotiations, we discovered that Meridian's security infrastructure was weaker than they'd admitted. They weren't just looking for an acquisition. They desperately needed one to prevent a potential security catastrophe. I could have walked away, let them scramble to find another solution. But I saw an opportunity for something better. Instead of a simple acquisition, I proposed a merger that would effectively give Mitchell Security Solutions control of Meridian's entire security division. The board was desperate enough to agree. The final detail? I would become CEO of the merged companies. The papers were signed on a Tuesday. The announcement would be made the following Monday. And in between, Thanksgiving at the Mitchell family home. Mom had been especially insistent about attendance this year. The CEO is coming, she announced proudly. He wants to meet the whole family before the big announcement on Monday. What she didn't know was that I'd arranged it deliberately, chosen this moment for maximum impact. The paperwork was signed, the deals were done, and there was nothing anyone could do to change it. Thanksgiving morning arrived crisp and clear. I pulled up to my parents' house in my usual Honda Civic. No need to spoil the surprise with the Porsche just yet. Mom was in full hostess mode, directing caterers and fussing over place settings. "Alex, at least tell me you're wearing the suit I bought you," she said by way of greeting. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm dressed appropriately for the occasion." Michael arrived next, stepping out of his luxury car with his wife Jessica, both dressed like they'd stepped out of a corporate catalog. Diana followed shortly after, already checking emails on her phone. "Look who finally learned to be on time." Diana smirked, eyeing my casual arrival. "Though you could have dressed better for Mom's big day." I just smiled and helped carry dishes to the dining room. As guests began arriving, Mom's colleagues from Meridian, all eager to be present for what they knew would be a historic announcement. The comments about my career choices grew more frequent. "Still working on that startup?" one of Mom's colleagues asked, not bothering to hide his condescension. "Something like that," I replied, checking my watch. Almost time. We gathered around the massive dining table, 24 people in all. Mom was practically glowing with pride as she introduced her executive colleagues, saving the most important announcement for last. "And of course, we're waiting for one more special guest," she said, beaming. "The CEO himself is joining us." That's when she turned to me, her smile faltering slightly. "Alex is still finding himself," she announced to the table, "unlike his successful siblings." The doorbell rang. That must be him. Mom stood quickly, smoothing her dress. Dr. Anderson walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. He'd agreed to play along with my plan, understanding the importance of timing. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said formally, then turned to me. "Sir, the board is ready for your decision about Monday's announcement." The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Mom's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Michael stopped mid-chew. Diana's phone slipped from her fingers. "Thank you, James," I replied calmly. "Please let them know everything will proceed as planned." Mom's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally, dawning horror as understanding set in. "Alex," she whispered. "What is he talking about?" I stood, straightening my jacket. "Everyone, I believe some introductions are in order. I'm Alexander Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Security Solutions, and, as of Monday, Chief Executive of the merged security divisions of Meridian Technologies and MSS. The turkey wasn't the only thing that got roasted that afternoon, but the real fireworks were just beginning. You could have heard a pin drop in the dining room. 24 faces stared at me in various states of shock, disbelief, and, in the case of my mother's colleagues, dawning recognition. That's impossible, Michael finally sputtered. Your company is just a small startup. A small startup that just acquired controlling interest in Meridian's security division, Dr. Anderson corrected smoothly. Though acquired might not be the right word. Rescued might be more accurate, given the state of their current security infrastructure. Mom's face had gone from red to white. As SVP of operations, she knew exactly how desperate Meridian's security situation had been. And now she was realizing that her disappointment of a son had been their salvation. The garage company, Diana whispered, her legal mind putting pieces together. All those years, it wasn't failing. You were building the most advanced AI-driven security system in the industry. I finished for her. Yes, though I have to thank you all. Your constant criticism made it much easier to operate in stealth mode. One of Mom's colleagues, Brad from finance, cleared his throat. Mrs. Mitchell, you never mentioned your son was the founder of MSS. She didn't know, I said quietly. None of them did. They were too busy being embarrassed by my little startup to actually ask what I was building. Dad, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally found his voice. The valuation, the merger terms. $8 billion, Dr. Anderson supplied helpfully. Though that's just the initial valuation. Once we announce the new security contracts next quarter. The sound Mom made was somewhere between a gasp and a whimper. She'd spent 20 years climbing Meridian's corporate ladder, and her youngest son had just become her boss. If you'll excuse me, I stood, straightening my tie. Dr. Anderson and I have some details to finalize before Monday's announcement. Mom, thanks for dinner. Though I suspect future family gatherings will be different. As I turned to leave, Michael jumped up. Wait, all those times I offered you a job at Goldman were deeply appreciated, I smiled. In fact, Goldman is one of our biggest clients. Your boss reports to my board next week about their security upgrade needs. Jessica, Michael's wife, actually snorted into her wine glass. She'd always been the only one who bothered to ask about my work with genuine interest. The next few days were chaos. News of the merger leaked, and suddenly the reclusive tech genius behind Mitchell Security Solutions was front-page news. My face was splashed across business magazines, my overnight success story, dissected by talking heads who had no idea it was built on years of careful planning. Monday morning, I walked into Meridian's headquarters for the official announcement. The security guard did a double-take. He was used to waving me through as Mrs. Mitchell's son when I visited Mom for lunch. Now he was scrambling to find my new executive access badge. The boardroom was packed. Mom sat rigid in her SVP chair, looking like she'd aged 10 years over the weekend. The other executives were a mix of nervous and curious. They'd all heard rumors about my management style. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, let's talk about the future of corporate security. For the next hour, I laid out my vision. The integration of AI with physical security, the predictive threat analysis system, the contracts we'd already secured with major global corporations. With each revelation, I could see my mother's colleagues realizing just how badly they'd underestimated me. And finally, I concluded, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, my mother is SVP of operations. No, this won't affect her position. I paused for effect. Her performance review will be handled by the board, just like any other executive. The relief on Mom's face, lasted exactly 3 seconds before she realized what that meant. She'd have to prove her worth just like everyone else, without family connections to fall back on. After the meeting, she tried to catch me alone. "Alex, honey, we should talk." "Of course," I replied professionally. "Have your assistant contact mine for a meeting. I'm pretty booked this week, but we should be able to find time next Tuesday." Her face crumpled slightly. "I'm your mother." "And I'm your CEO," I said quietly. "We'll need to figure out how to navigate that professionally. Just like you always wanted me to learn about the corporate world, remember?" The next few weeks were a masterclass in family dynamics under corporate pressure. Michael suddenly discovered a burning interest in cybersecurity, sending me lengthy emails about potential synergies between our companies. Diana's law firm mysteriously ended up pitching for our legal work. They weren't successful. Dad tried to play peacemaker, inviting me to his country club to talk things over. I accepted, arriving in my new Porsche, enjoying the way his golf buddies' heads turned. "You could have told us," he said over drinks. "Would you have believed me?" I asked. "Or would you have tried to take over, push me into doing things your way, just like always?" He had no answer for that. The real change came during the first quarter earnings call. Our integrated security system had exceeded all projections, driving Meridian's stock to record highs. Mom sat in on the call, watching as I fielded questions from analysts who used to ignore her, now hanging on my every word. "Mr. Mitchell," one analyst asked, "your mother has been with Meridian for 20 years. How does it feel to be her boss?" I smiled, looking directly at Mom. Success in business isn't about family connections or following traditional paths. It's about innovation, vision, and the courage to build something new. I learned that by watching my mother's career, even if we disagreed about how to apply those lessons. She cried later in her office. I pretended not to notice when I passed by. Christmas that year was interesting. Gone were the snide comments about my career choices, replaced by awkward attempts to show they'd supported me all along. "I always knew you had potential," Michael claimed, conveniently forgetting years of condescension. "Remember when I helped you with your first business plan?" Diane added, apparently forgetting she'd refused to even read it. Mom had prepared my favorite dishes, a transparent attempt at reconciliation. But as we sat around the table, the power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. "I got you something," I said, handing Mom a small package. Inside was a framed copy of my first business plan, the one I'd written in that garage they'd been so ashamed of. Attached was a note. "Thanks for teaching me that success comes in many forms, even if you didn't mean to. 5 years have passed since that Thanksgiving revelation. Meridian's security division, under my leadership, has become the industry standard. Michael's firm now pays us handsomely for their security needs, and Diana's law firm regularly loses bids to our preferred counsel. Mom still works at Meridian, though she's no longer SCVP. She took a different role, heading up our corporate training division. Turns out she's excellent at teaching others about corporate structure, even as she struggled to see beyond it herself. Last month, Northwestern Business School invited me to give the commencement speech. As I stood at the podium, I could see my family in the audience, their expressions so different from those dismissive looks of years past. Success isn't always about climbing the ladder someone else built, I told the graduates. Sometimes it's about building your own ladder, even if others can't see where it leads. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right in ways they never imagined possible. After the ceremony, Mom hugged me tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "We were so focused on our version of success, We couldn't see you were creating something better." "It's okay," I replied. "Though I hope you've learned to ask about people's garages. You never know what they're building in there." Dad shook my hand, pride finally reaching his eyes. "You showed us all," he said simply. Yes, I did. But the real victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in building something that made their version of success look small by comparison. These days, when people talk about the Mitchell family, they don't mention Michael's banking career or Diana's law partnership. They talk about the youngest son who revolutionized corporate security, who built an empire from a garage, while his family was too busy judging to notice. And Mom? She finally stopped introducing me as her son who was finding himself. Now she just says, "This is Alex, my son, and my boss." The pride in her voice is real now, earned rather than expected. Sometimes the best success story isn't about following the path others set for you. It's about blazing your own trail and letting them catch up when they finally see where it leads. Last week, I bought my parents' house, the one where that fateful Thanksgiving dinner took place. Not to live in, but to convert into Mitchell Security's new innovation center. The garage where I started will become our AI research lab. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't just success. It's turning the place they doubted you into the foundation of an empire they never saw coming. And that's a success story even my family had to admit they never saw coming.